With humble salutations to the feet of Supreme Guru, heartfelt gratitude to Mahavatar Babaji who inspired us to make this video. On August 14, 1952, Vitian was suffering badly from leg pain. The author, Ramaya, inquired whether the group meditation could be postponed until August 20, 1952. Babaji referred to the proposal on August 15, 1952. Babaji said, "If you give up group meditation, it will affect the work you both are expected to do for me. If your other half, which is the author, is thinking about the pain, why does not do what is necessary?" After a pause, Master replied, "All right, I will tap. May contact him tonight," said Babaji. Then continued his speech. Some yogis have declared that if there is always that feature of the infinite power of God in the thoughts of every person, then no one can work against us, and God's support will always be there with us. During the period of Kurukshetra, there were a very few men who know that Krishna is the incarnation of God. While preparations for the war was being made, both Duryodhana and Arjuna went to Sri Krishna to seek his help. By knowing their intentions, Sri Krishna placed one of the two alternatives before each of them. So Duryodhana instantly prayed for the great army with trained soldiers, while Arjuna preferred Sri Krishna's presence only. The illustration represents two types of men. One believes in the resource of the world, the other believes in the power of God. To men like Arjuna, God is the Almighty and man cannot do nothing without him. To many, God is no abstraction. He is the author of the universe and the self of all beings. He is the Lord of cosmic process because they worship him with love. God is to them is not simply the embodiment of purity and power. Not only that, but he hears human appeals too. He appears and talks with them. Sometimes he fakes the human form for the sake of his devotees. While born as men, he suffers much more than ordinary mortals could suffer. Those who establish human relationships with God establish the based on the highest purity, unselfishness, and intense love. Example, Mirabai said, "You art no other than my husband." There are others who look upon him as their master or child. Yes, others says, "You are the mother." Thus, the divine love in various forms gradually grows into perfection. A lover of God has to annihilate his little self completely until he finds God in all beings. In long run, he becomes one with him and thus solves the riddles of life. So every person in the world, in order to reach the level described above, in order to gain intimacy with God, must have a pure quality of selflessness and the philosophy of loving everyone when trying to know oneself. Now we have the message of Swami Vivekananda, the patriot and yogi of modern India. Arise, awake, and sleep not till the goal is reached. If we notice this call, then we will realize that to attain the path of evolution, to unfold the eternal existence, consciousness, bliss, which involved itself in its own veil of ignorance. That is, everyone should get rid of their ignorance with knowledge. It is a blessed ray from the same eternal light, which with a thundersome voice calls up on its own image to attempt an upward journey to march into its path of evolution to unfold itself. The first step is always to overcome inertia by setting in a tremendous activity. Next, control, followed by calmness, and finally going to the source from which it all started. This calls goes forth to the whole world and especially to India. Years and years have passed away since he shook off his mortal coils, and the message has only now gotten a small footing in the continent. Actually, all that is required is for each man to sit boldly upright on his deer skin and imagine God as our eternal mother, who is always ready to bestow the priceless gift of divine wisdom if we can only turn our gaze away from the world's shadowy objects. Thoughts like these increase our longing and make us redouble our efforts to realize God. This is a tremendous statement for those modern times. Man can see God as the very substratum of our existence, as the indwelling presence in all, in whom all humans and mortal relationships reach their completion, rather than as an extra cosmic being or the embodiment of moral law. As an example, it should be noted that there was a man in our time, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who encountered God face to face. He radiated love for all without regard from national or geographical boundaries. Having discovered the fountain of heavenly love, God consciousness pervaded every fiber of his existence. He appeared to be a man from another universe despite the fact that he lived in the same universe. He was entirely converted from man to God. Sri Ramakrishna further proved that the ideal spiritual life was always possible, and it was not the monopoly of any particular age. He went on to say that in order to live a spiritual life, everyone requires attention. The lives of saints and yogis, as well as their teachings, are desperately needed by modern people. If we are sincere, the vision of truth offered to man by those sages and yogis in ancient times cannot be denied to us now if we are eager for it. The revelation of God takes place at all times, and the mind of divine mercy never ceases to flow. Who could live, who could breathe, if God did not form the very core of our existence? Indeed, for sages, seers, and true personification of God Himself hover throughout the planet, tapping many and appearing in flesh and blood and speaking to a chosen few. Experimentation, observation, and verification are the three main components of the scientific method. The method is based on the science of religion, also known as yoga. God is not the monopoly of any religion or creed, but the common property of all. He is the loving Father of mankind. He is present everywhere, from the blare of the crows to Brahma, as the inmost essence of all. He is the life and substratum of all entities, from the atom to the highest prophet. Art, science, and religion are different expressions of truth, but one can understand it only when one has realized the unity of existence. Is God formless, or does He have a form? God exists in both physical and spiritual forms, yet transcends both. He is the only one who can say what else He is. The difference between God in form and God without form is like the difference between ice and water. It gains shape as water freezes into ice. There are no differences between entities with and without form. He who possesses from also possesses no form. The infinite reduction himself to the finite, as it were, under the strengthening impacts of his worshippers' great devotion, and comes before him as a creature with form. The ice melts away with the arrival of sun, and the awakening of knowledge of God, with its form, melts away into formlessness. Another example: the water in the ocean, when viewed from a distance, appears to have dark blue color, but becomes colorless when taken it in hand. Similarly, God is also associated with definite color and complexion from a distance, but He is the attributeless truth when the devotee merges into Him. The entire world is extremely contaminated. God, on the other hand, is alone, unpolluted. Not every man in the world has fully described in his words what God means with consciousness. Only the silent depths of our hearts can reveal his true nature. When an aspirant has merged with God, either words or the mind can adequately express God's actual nature. The text in the Vedas says, the words come back when the mind vainly trying to express what truth is. What is the divine-human relationship? This is the most question of religion. When we get into the details of it, if we think of ourselves as physical beings, God is our master and father, and we are his servants, perfect instruments or children. When we look at ourselves as embodied souls, then God is the universal soul and we all are the eminence. For example, God and man share the same attributes and qualities, just like fire and its sparkles. However, when we consider ourselves as spirits, we are identical with God, the one and the same spirit, birthless, deathless, causeless, and infinite. The cherished treasure of human progress, such as love, understanding, unselfishness, and other ethical principles, can be explained only from the standpoint of this unity. Otherwise, there is no room for fellow feeling in the world of municipality governed by lifeless nature laws. This unity comprehends all objects, animate and inanimate, as well as men and angels. So everyone should recognize that unity is the key to all life. The entire universe is one, not only as a stretch of matter or idea, but also as individual spirit. In this race of races, one is confronted with the oneness of existence, the divinity of man and the unity of God and the harmony of religions. However, religion's task is to educate the world and lead mankind down the path of tolerance and peace. And each religion, to be worthy of its name, must contribute its portion to the far-off divine events towards which the whole of creation moves. In this age, there are many great yogis who practice and preach to establish unity and love between religions. If you think about the potential and possibilities of man, he has. Man is divine nature, either as created in the image of God or as his spark or one with him. The essential nature of man can never lose this perfection. There is no such thing as sin which can change the quality of soul. The wicked action of man may impose a veil upon his divine nature but can never destroy it. An action is called good or moral that helps us to rediscover the hidden divinity, and an action of immortal or bad which conjures up before us the appearance of mindfulness. The experience we gather as the physical body, mental or aesthetic level, do not belong to our real soul. They may be called at best a mixture of truth and falsehood. Though this inscrutable ignorance, we behave as if we were corporeal beings. We have hypothesized ourselves into thinking that we are imperfect and limited, and that we exist in time and space, subject to the law of causation. The aim of religion is to dehypothesize ourselves and make us aware of our divine heritage. Then Babaji asked us to meditate with the following words: waiting for the word of the Master, watching the hidden light, listening to catch his orders in the very midst of the fight, seeing his slightest signal across the heads of the throng, hearing his faintest whisper above earth's loudest song. And then he continued, what you all need to know is, no matter what, you should be aware of that what is nearer to our heart, and be always in your own company and enjoy it, then you will not and cannot fail. Cultivate the awareness. You and you alone are the general body. Silence and meditation, Maunam and Mananam, are the twin aids to peace, power, and prosperity. To experience peaceful life and eternal happiness, the eternal chant is Om Shanti Om. After telling VTN to take a break, Babaji left.
చరణారవిందముల వ్రాలితి స్మరణానందమున వందనమిద నీకు యోగానంద నితాంత సచ్చిదానంద ప్రశాంత నిర్మల చిత్త సర్వోపనిషత్సార వేద వేదాంగ గుణలయోద్దీపిత గుణనిధి అగణ్య గుణాతీత గురువరేణ్య పరమాత్మవు నీవే పరమేశ దివ్య బాబాజీ మహావతార. మార్చగలుగు విషయములను మార్చగలుగు ధీరత, మార్చలేని విషయములను సమ్మతించు ప్రశాంతత, ఈ రెంటి మధ్య వ్యత్యాసమును తెలుసుకొనగల వివేకత ప్రసాదించవయ్య పరమపురుష దివ్య బాబాజీ మహావతార.
Let's discuss in the next episode, to be continued.